Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to keep talking about my current project of coding the combat system for a viewer's game. In the last video, we talked about allowing the enemies to move, but of course the player character and any companions can also move. So what I'm going to talk about this week is how we give the player character the option to move. In particular, we'll be looking at how it works differently because the player character's position is always counted as 0. In other words, everything is measured from the player character. So when the player character moves, we don't actually change anything that's stored in terms of where the player character is. We have to sort of move everyone else in the opposite direction. So I've randomized a combat here. As you can see, one of the enemies has won the initiative, and then the player character is going second, and then another enemy. So what should happen if the code works is that the second enemy should advance twice, and then the player character should get their turn, and then if we choose to move, we should be able to see that they can move as well. So let's have a look. We press continue. We have the initiative in order there, and it prints the distance, tells us that enemy 2 moves towards the player character twice, so they should be at distance 3 once we press continue, and we can see that indeed they are. And now it's the player character's go. So if the player character chooses to advance, they won't be at distance 1 because, again, the player character is always at distance 0. What should happen is that enemy 2 should be at distance 2 and enemy 1 should be at distance 4. So let's have a look and see if that works. And we can see that, yes, it is. That's right. It doesn't print distance 5 because there's now nobody at distance 5. And then if we retreat, it should set things back to how they were before. Obviously, that's not something you'd do in a real combat round. You wouldn't advance and then retreat because it's a bit pointless. You'd choose to attack instead, presumably. But just to demonstrate it, we'll see if it works. And we can see that, yes, it does. And then enemy 1 will move towards player character. All right, so that is what the program does. Let's spend the rest of the video looking at the code. Now, I have had to rearrange the code a little bit to cope with the fact that whether we print the distances depends a little bit on who's gone, but I don't want to talk about that too much because that's not the main thing I wanted to talk about today. I might do a separate video on that. I've actually created a new variable to cope with whether we need to print the distance or not, but that's sort of an extra video's worth of material probably. So you'll probably remember that we have this page, which I have renamed to whose go is it, just because that seems a bit more descriptive, and this is to do with the new variable, so we'll ignore that for now. Let's zoom in a little bit to make it a little bit easier to see. We have branching based on who is moving now. So if this variable has a value of 0, we go to player character. If it's greater than 0, we go to companion, and if it's anything else, which means less than 0, then we go to enemy. So we've dealt with enemy. The companion page is still blank. It's been created, but I haven't put anything in it. And what we're going to look at today is the player character page, which was blank last video, but now has some stuff in it. So we have essentially 3 buttons. We can advance, we can retreat, or we can attack. There are other options in the system. We can tell the companions to do something, but that's something I'm going to deal with down the track. It's sort of complex enough to be a topic in itself. So at the moment we're just dealing with advancing and retreating, and then I'll probably look at setting up attacks next. So we've talked about the button command before, but to refresh your memory, we have less than, we have the word button, we have what text is printed on the button, and that can either be just a word, as it is here. But if there's any spaces in the text, we need to enclose it in quotes, because that makes it clear which bit of the text is the text that's going to be on the button, and which of the text is the destination of the button, which is the next bit in the button. So we have just the word button, the text that's printed on the button or displayed on the button, and then the destination of the button. And in both cases of these two, you can have them like this as just a normal word, but if you have a space, you need to enclose it in quotes. If it's just a single word, you can enclose it in quotes. It won't generate an error, but it's not necessary. And then at the end of it, we have less than slash button, greater than, and then in the middle, if we want to, we can have code that executes if this particular button is pressed. And that's what we want to do in this case, because you can see that both advance and retreat, they go to the same page, the page PC moves. So how are we gonna, when we get there, how are we gonna distinguish, how are we gonna know whether we're advancing the player character or retreating them? Well, we'll know because we set Z to a different value. We set Z to 1 if we're retreating, and we set Z to -1 if we are advancing. And that's sort of the opposite of what you'd think. You might think, well, if we advance, surely that's increasing the distance, and retreating is decreasing the distance because we're at 0 and the enemy's at 5. So surely advancing towards the enemy is increasing the number. But remember that Z is the change to everyone else's position. So if the PC advances, then that means everyone else is moving in the opposite direction. So Z is sort of set to the opposite of what you'd think. It's -1 for advancing and 1 for retreating. So in either case, we will end up at PC moves. And there's a little note here that says, other than the PC, everyone's position changes by Z, i.e. if Z is 1, their position will be increased, and if it's -1, it'll be decreased. We do this in 2 loops because we have 2 different arrays, one for companions and one for enemies. But the format of the code, the structure of the code is the same. It's just that there's a couple of variables that are different. So we have a for loop here using the temporary variable y because Z is the change, so we need it for that. This one goes from 1 to com_max, which is the maximum number of companions, and we have stored position in com anything 3. So com y3 is the position of companion y, and we set com y3 plus equals z, which means it's set to its current value plus z. And then we do exactly the same for the enemies, except that instead of com max, we have NME, or instead of com_max, sorry, we have NME_max, which is the maximum number of enemies, and we, instead of adding to com y3, we add to NME y3. Now, in both cases, this might mean that we're moving companions that don't exist, because of course not all these slots are going to be filled. There either might not have been those enemies at the start of or companions at the start of the combat, or they might have been, but they might have been killed. But it doesn't matter because we're only displaying the characters that are still alive. So changing their position isn't going to have any effect, because when we look at displaying everyone, we'll see that that non-existent enemy's hit points aren't over 0, and therefore we'll know not to display them. And that's similar for companions. Again, this print underscore dist, that's the variable that tells us that we need to print the distance, but I'll deal with how that works in a separate video. And then we go on to next action. So either because a player character, like the monsters and companions, gets 2 actions a turn, either they'll get to move again or attack, or it'll be, if that was their second move, that's the end of their turn and we move on to someone else. And so that's how we move player characters. What I'll probably do next is get onto attacking, or we might get onto companions. I'll probably do that later, because what they do is a little bit random. It's not quite as straightforward as the enemies just moving forward and attacking. It depends on sort of their relationship with the player character and so on. But for now, I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.